Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Heather Brown. As Director of Grant Writing and Publications at the University of Missouri-Columbia, I am pleased to welcome you to the 4th Annual Federal Research Update webinar. This event is sponsored by the University of Missouri-Columbia, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, and the Florida High-Tech Corridor Council, an economic development initiative of the State University System of Florida. Thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any technology issues or problems during today's broadcast, please send an email to federalupdate@missouri.edu. And if you have a question you'd like our presenters to answer, please also send that to federalupdate@missouri.edu. You can send your questions at any time. You don't have to wait just for the question and answer period, but if you send them, I will make sure that they get asked. Finally, we have viewers joining us from across the country. As a result, we will be using phrases such as top of the hour and bottom of the hour to indicate when our next speaker will be beginning. Today, I am very pleased to introduce Jeremy Leffler. Jeremy is the Outreach Specialist in the Policy Office, Division of Institution and Award Support within the National Science Foundation's Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management. Since assuming the position of Outreach Specialist in October 2003, his primary duties have included development and implementation of communication strategies that inform the research community as well as NSF staff about NSF proposal and award policies and procedures. Prior to coming to the National Science Foundation, Mr. Leffler was a program officer in the Communications and External Affairs Office at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. Jeremy, turning it over to you.
Well, thank you, Heather, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad we were able to reschedule this presentation, and I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm going to be giving an update to NSF policies and procedures. My colleague, Michael Sieverts, who's the director of our budget division, gave a presentation earlier this week on the NSF budget, and the budget outlook for NSF. So I won't be covering budget details, but I will be going really what we do best in policy, which is going down into the weeds of policies and procedures. So I'm going to be doing that for you today. Before I get started, I do want to talk a little bit just about what NSF has done in response to Hurricane Sandy and as it pertains to deadline dates. We did extend deadline dates for October 29th and 30th for 1 week. And then we also provided for some specific counties in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut a extension for deadlines that were October 30th through November 2nd. Today, we provided another 1 week extension. So we do have a lot of information about that on the NSF Fastlane website, so I'd recommend that you look at that. But also do keep in mind that if for any reason, any weather type related incidents such as hurricanes, if you are affected, you can go directly to the cognizant NSF program officer. They do have the authority to make extensions based on specific types of incidents. So you always have that option to you, and if the current extensions that we provided blanket up on the NSF Fastlane website still are not accommodating to you, you can be in touch with your NSF program officer either by phone or by email. That's for Fastlane. In Grants.gov, we've taken a similar approach. However, you won't see that in Grants.gov itself, but we have made extensions to funding opportunities. Grants.gov will allow late submissions for deadlines that were affected in that date range that I mentioned. So Heather told you who I was and what I do. Let me tell you a little bit about what the Policy Office does. We're responsible for implementing policies and procedures for proposals, for managing awards, for outreach to the research and education communities, and also internally at NSF, we help educate our ever-changing role of program officers that come to NSF. If you ever have questions, either that don't get answered today or things that come up in the future, you can always send an email to policy@nsf.gov, and we have a staff of 6 right now who can, we really try to get back to you as quickly as we can, or at least point you in the right direction. We are also responsible for the clearance of all funding opportunities that get posted on the NSF website, and we clear those to make sure that they're consistent with NSF policies and procedures. I'd also like to note that we will be conducting a webinar very similar to this one on November 19th. So if you have questions about that, you can send an email to policy@nsf.gov and we'll send you additional information. Okay. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the revised NSF merit review criteria that were recently published in the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. I'm going to talk about how we came to revising those merit review criteria, and then how we're implementing them in policy in the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. There are some revisions, some parallel revisions to the Grants.gov application guide that I'll talk about, as well as an update on cost sharing at the National Science Foundation, and then some pretty major changes to how project reporting is done for NSF awards. Okay, so this slide and the next slide really give you a history of merit review at NSF, and it provides a context for what I'm going to be talking about in terms of what's happened with the merit review criteria. And what you see is that even beginning back when NSF was first created back in 1951, we had just one criteria, which was the scientific merit of the proposed research, which corresponds really to our current review criteria of intellectual merit. We have, over spanning these years through up until 1997, really had a number of ways of reviewing proposals, from having a single criteria to multiple criteria and also criteria that were different depending on the type of institution that you were coming from, to a set of 4 criteria that existed from 1981 to 1997. In 2007, we ended up with what our 2 current merit review criteria are: intellectual merit and broader impacts. In 2007, we added this emphasis about potentially transformative research, which was added to both the intellectual merit and the broader impacts criteria. We got away from, back in 2007, from 2007 to 2013, we got away from referring to them as Criterion 1 and Criterion 2. We simply refer to them now as both criteria, intellectual merit and broader impacts. And where we stand today, you see in the last frame there, the intellectual merit and broader impact review criteria remain, but we've provided some clarifications to them. And this is how you want to think of the NSF merit review criteria, in terms of there are 3 underlying principles, and I'm going to go into all of these in a moment. There are 2 review criteria, and there are 5 review elements that apply to both of them. So let's talk a little bit about those and how this came to be. So the National Science Board, which oversees the National Science Foundation in terms of policy, established a merit review task force back in spring of 2010. And the rationale behind that, and looking at the merit review criteria, was that it had been some time since there had been a complete review of the criteria. There was this opportunity to align those criteria with the NSF's new strategic plan, which we put out every few years and gets revised every few years. And we also had these reports that there was confusion related to the broader impacts review criteria. At the same time that this was happening, the America Competes Reauthorization Act of 2010 provided some language that mandated that NSF continue to emphasize its broader impacts criteria, and also that projects needed to achieve a set of societal goals. And these societal goals include things like increased economic competitiveness, development of a competitive STEM workforce, and increased partnerships between academia and industry. There are a number of other of these societal goals. Those are a few of them. Many of these societal goals were already included in a document that we called Examples that Demonstrate Broader Impacts. And I'll talk a little bit more about that document as we go forward. So the National Science Board issued a final report. They conducted a survey in which more than 4,500 people responded, including NSF staff, the research community, reviewers, proposers, and they came up with there were a number of themes that came out of this report, and one of them is that the intellectual merit criteria is clear and clearly understood. There needs to be additional guidance with respect to the broader impacts criteria. That institutions, that PI institutions should play a greater role in supporting the broader impacts criteria, and that also that there was not a clear sense of what needed to be done post-award with regard to assessing the impact of those broader impacts. So the report concluded, again, that the intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria did capture the important elements that need to guide the evaluation of NSF proposals, but there needed to be some revisions to the broader impacts criterion, and that really an underlying set of core principles needed to be implemented to guide the review and decision-making process for NSF. So again, you want to think of it as 3 review principles, 2 review criteria, and 5 review elements. So let's go into the guiding principles. And these principles are really aimed at 3 audiences. You've got the reviewers of NSF proposals, you've got NSF program officers who make funding recommendations based on the input they see from reviewers, and of course you have proposers. And what we really wanted you to know, the community to know as the proposers, is how we are asking reviewers to look at your proposal, and ultimately what the NSF program officer needs to look at with regard to their funding recommendations. So obviously all NSF projects should be of the highest quality, and the potential to advance or transform the frontiers of knowledge. That in the aggregate, NSF projects should contribute more broadly to achieving societal goals. And when we say in the aggregate, this is looking for NSF program officers really to look at their portfolio and look at your individual project and say, how is this going to contribute broadly to my portfolio of projects, both at my program level, at my division level, at my directorate level, and ultimately at the NSF level. And then regarding meaningful assessment, PIs are expected to be accountable for carrying out the activities that are funded, and that there need to be specific descriptions of the activities that the PI intends to do, and a plan in place to document the outputs of those activities. So here you have the review criteria, and really these review criteria have not changed. Again, you will see some differences there in that we previously listed intellectual merit and broader impacts. They were questions. What are the intellectual merits of your proposal? What are the broader impacts of your proposal? And then there were a series of questions that followed for each of those. We've now made these statements, but what you really want to pay attention to is the paragraph that's there up front, which says, why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do it? How will you know if it is successful? and what benefits are going to accrue if the project is successful. And this applies both to the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. So now we come to the elements. And again, you want to think of this in terms of the underlying principles, the 2 review criteria, and the 5 review elements. And these may look familiar to you because these are pretty much 1 through 4 are questions that we included individually under the intellectual merit and broader impacts review criterion. But now we've separated them out as elements that apply to both intellectual merit and broader impacts. The new addition to this is number 5 there, which is, are there adequate resources available to the PI to carry out the proposed activities? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as we go on and what that means for you in terms of submitting your proposals. Okay. So I'm going to go into the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide revisions, the PAP Guide as we call it, and I'm going to talk about how we're implementing merit review and a whole host of other changes that were made. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about how this process works. Typically, we put out a new guide every October, and but well before that, we let the community know that we're going to be publishing a new guide, and we published that in the Federal Register earlier in the year. This year, we did things just a little differently than we've done before. We did obviously let the community know that we were issuing a new guide with new policies. We also issued it in draft form with highlighted changes that we were making and that we were presenting to the community and also to NSF senior management as these are the changes that are being considered. We put that out for comment over the summer. We did receive a number of comments, and we released the PAP guide on October 4th, 2012, and we always give the community time to really digest the changes that we've instituted. And so these changes will be for proposals that are submitted or due on January 14th, 2013. So say you have a deadline date that is January 15th, and you think, oh, well, I'm going to get ahead of the game and I'm just going to submit my proposal early on January 12th with the old guidance. You can't do that. You need to follow the guidance that is presented in the PAP guide. Okay? Okay. So I want to talk about I'm going to talk about some significant changes that we included and some clarifications. And also note that in this guide, you'll see at the very front of the proposal guide, we list all of the significant changes with a description of what they are and where they are. So when you open up the new guide, you can go to it and look and see where all of these changes are. So I just talked about the merit review criteria. I'm going to switch to telling you how that's being implemented. I'm going to talk about some new proposal certifications that are required, a brief section on indirect costs. We have a new category of really for receiving proposals. Those are proposals not accepted, and I'm going to talk about what that means. I'm going to talk about this new award cash management service. And then we've got some clarifications that include proposals with high resolution graphics, proposals for conferences, symposia, and workshops, and some other things that you see there, which I'll cover very briefly. So let's go back to the merit review criteria and what we're doing. Now, the PAP guide is composed of 2 parts. It's composed of the grant proposal guide, which is part 1, and part 2 is the award and administration guide. The grant proposal guide is what tells you how to prepare your proposal. And it is, I believe, the most downloaded document on the NSF website. It's a long document. We know people don't read every single word. We know that a lot of PIs get their information directly from the funding opportunities that are announced on the NSF website. So, in addition to all of the changes in the guide, we've also put notice of all of these changes in every single funding opportunity, new funding opportunity that has a deadline of January 14th or later. And we've also put information onto the specific program websites that you may go to either find a solicitation or a program, and so that you should not be missing this information. Now, I say that what we've done with regard to program solicitations, we have to go through each and every one of them and add this information to each and every solicitation. We can't do a global find and replace. So what we're doing is we're first starting with all of the solicitations that are closest to the January 14th deadline date, and then going further out. So if you see a solicitation that's after January 14th, say it's in February or March, and you don't see this information, don't worry, it will be there and we will get to it. Okay, so let's talk about the changes that you're going to see right away in FastLane beginning January 14th. The project summary is the one-page summary of the project. And previously, in the current guidance, we said that you had to separately address intellectual merit and broader impacts in the project summary. We didn't say you must have a separate header or for intellectual merit, and you must have a separate header for broader impacts. But what we're doing now is that we are now going to, in FastLane, have 3 separate boxes for the project summary. There will be an overview where you talk generally about the project. There will be a statement on intellectual merit, a text box. There will be a statement on broader impacts. And together, those 3 boxes cannot exceed 4,600 characters, or 1 page. And that you will talk about the intellectual merit in that section, you will talk about the broader impacts in that section, and it will clearly show what you mean by intellectual merit and broader impacts, and the reviewers will have a clear sense of what you mean because there will be headers that are put over each of those sections. Now, if you come from a discipline like engineering or math where you must have special characters in the intellectual merit and broader impacts or in the overview, FastLane cannot accept special characters. So what we've done is we've allowed you the ability to upload a PDF document with an overview, with the intellectual merit, and with the broader impacts. You can't do both. So you can't fill in the text box and submit and upload a document. You have to do one or the other. If you don't fill anything out in these text boxes, you will not be able to submit your proposal. You must fill in those text boxes for your proposal to even come in to NSF. Okay? So it will not be accepted. Now, in the project description, so we went from the project summary, now we're going to the project description. You have to have a separate section within the project description with a discussion of the broader impacts of the proposed activities. You also have to address how with results from prior support, if the intellectual merit and broader impacts of results from prior support. Now there are some new certifications with regard to merit review. There is one new certification with regard to merit review, excuse me. The AOR, who signs submits the proposal, signs the proposal, has to certify that there will be organizational support made available as described in the proposal to address the broader impacts and the intellectual merit. If you remember earlier, I said this stemmed from the America Competes Act language, and is part of one of those 5 review elements, which requires institutions to certify that there is organizational support. Also, this also stems from the America Competes Act language, where we want you to assess the broader impacts in your annual and final reports. So you'll need to do that when you submit your annual and final reports. We've done a lot of updating of FastLane help for all of these sections in FastLane. So if you're used to that, using that FastLane help, you'll notice that we've made a number of changes to describe everything that's changed. Okay. Now, we've also made changes for reviewers. So because these are some major changes, or major revisions, I should say, to the criteria, we also are guiding reviewers. So we are giving reviewers the information about the merit review principles, that they need to evaluate the proposal against the 3 review criteria, and they need to consider those 5 review elements in the review of both criteria. In FastLane, if you're a reviewer, if you have reviewed, you'll notice that we've updated the reviewer form in FastLane so that you can see the principles, the criteria, and the elements on that page when you're writing your review. And we've also added a text box for you to be able to address any solicitation-specific review criteria that are part of your review. Also, this this document that we have currently that has examples of broader impacts, we have deleted that document, and the idea was that the reason we did that is because we didn't want to seem as if NSF is being too proscriptive in terms of what broader impacts are. We want you to tell us what they are. There was some part of the confusion around broader impacts stemmed from this document, which, even though we said they were examples of broader impacts, were oftentimes seen as a prescriptive list. And so that document, beginning January 14th, will not be accessible. I mentioned already about FastLane help that's been updated as well. We've done a lot of outreach. We've put out a lot of information. We have a merit review website that includes all of this information that I've just talked about. We have also put up resources for the proposer community, which you can see the link here, or you can also link to from the merit review website. It includes fact sheets, it includes presentations, and it will include, shortly we hope, FAQs. We really need your help in developing FAQs for this. We're getting questions that are coming both from NSF staff and from people that are and from proposers, from reviewers. So we want your questions. We want to be able to develop a robust set of FAQs. So if you have any, send them to policy@nsf.gov. Okay, so I'm moving away from merit review, and I'm gonna talk about some of the other changes to the PAP guide. I mentioned already the proposal certification for organizational support. So that's first sub-bullet. There are also a few new certifications on tax obligations and liability and felony conviction that are included. So we've updated certifications for those. Okay. One of the major changes from our perspective, from the program officer perspective, is this change to biographical sketches, where we've renamed the publications section in the biographical sketch to a products. And this is meant to make clear that we're not just talking about publications, but we may be talking about data sets, software, patents, and copyrights. References to websites are appropriate as well. So we wanted to broaden this category within the bio sketch. Okay, indirect costs. This change began a couple of years ago when NSF, let me step back. When NSF revised its cost sharing policy 2 years ago, we noted that there were a number of solicitations that limited recovery of indirect costs. okay? And when we did that, we realized that we were effectively requiring you to cost share. So all of those solicitations that had a limitation on indirect cost rates have been or are being changed to require you to use your applicable indirect cost rate that's been negotiated with your cognizant federal agency. So that is except for participant support, the international travel, where we give $50 per international traveler, or in a specific program solicitation. A specific program solicitation could limit indirect costs only if it has been approved by the NSF director. And the only one currently that does that was recently published, is the NSF I-Corps program, where you get $5,000 in lieu of indirect costs. That was approved by the NSF director, by Dr. Subra Suresh, and is the only one currently out there new that takes such an approach. Okay, I talked about proposals not accepted, specifically the project summary in FastLane, if you don't fill out those 3 text boxes. Well, we have different categories we have return without review, we have proposals withdrawn, we have proposals awarded, proposals declined. We now have this new category called proposals not accepted. And it is a new category, meaning that FastLane will not permit submission of your proposal because you don't have one of the required elements. This already applied to data management plans, which are required to be uploaded as a supplementary document, and postdoctoral mentoring plans, if there's a postdoc list identified on the budget, has to be included, or it will not even get into FastLane, or will not be able to be submitted into FastLane. And also now for project summaries. This is how NSF is trying to, or attempting to really help with our program officers with compliance checking. We get a huge number of proposals every year. We get 55,000 plus proposals every year. We fund around 11,000 proposals every year. And that means our success rate overall is really low. And we want you to submit your best proposals. We want you to follow the policy that we've set, and we're helping you to do that as best that we can. So we do have this new category, proposals not accepted. This is just a list of the required sections of the proposal where you must include something in those sections, even if you don't have anything to include. And for example, every proposal must have a data management plan, but it's okay to say, this project does not require a plan, but you need to upload that as part of your proposal, and then it's in the reviewer's hands to decide if that is indeed the case. What we do plan to do, where possible, is take some of these required sections of the proposal and make some automated compliance checks with them. So for example, the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of the proposal, we would like to be able to make it so that if it's not there, you will not be able to submit your proposal. I'm going to talk about the facilities, equipment, and other resources section as we a little bit further down the road. The awardee cash management service. This is and the dollar sign is not a typo. That's what we're calling it. ACM dollar sign, ACM bling, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. We call it ACMS. It's replacing the current FastLane function, and it is being implemented in Research.gov. And I'm going to talk quite a bit more about Research.gov. But what this does is it eliminates this cash pooling method where awardee institutions are requesting funds on a lump sum basis, and rather they're going to give us detail payments for award level detail for payment requests. It's going to be implemented by April 2013. There's some pilots going on right now for this, and this is a service that we are putting in Research.gov, and it will give everyone involved a real-time look, award level look at expenditures. So we're really happy about that because it's going to help us and you. It's going to help us internally, and it's going to help you as well. This is just a shot of the payment request screen, if you've worked with the FFR, this should look really familiar. Just a couple of features that I don't know if you can see that here, but all awards are going to be linked to the Research.gov the award abstracts in Research.gov, and it will retain the account number to tie to your internal financial records. Again, you'll have to tell us how much to pay for each award. We're going to add a final payment checkbox to facilitate award closeouts. Okay, quickly on some things here. On high resolution graphics, previously you had to send those separately, but we're deleting this we're deleting this from the cover sheet because it's really no longer an issue for proposals at NSF. On conferences, symposia, and workshops, what we've done for these types of proposals, for conference proposals, for workshop proposals, is to clarify the type of information that you need to include in different sections of the proposal. Okay, so that's all in the PAPPG, in the PAP guide. So we're trying to be more clear about what is required for conference and workshop proposals. And then again, we've modified the proposal preparation checklist, which is in the GPG. We've modified that to be consistent with all of the changes that we've made. On conflict of interest policies, these are few and far between when there's an unmanageable conflict of interest, but when there is one, we're just letting you know what the NSF policy and procedure is. Our Office of General Counsel will, if there's an unmanageable conflict, will look at the copy of the institution's conflict of interest policy. They'll contact the awardee institution to see what actions have been taken, and then they're going to, ultimately request confirmation that those proposed actions have been accomplished. Again, there are not many of these per year, but we did want to let you know what our policy is for this. This change comes, or not so much a change, but an addition, comes directly from the Assistant Director for Biological Sciences at NSF. And so this section involving vertebrate animals was updated to include information about that had proposals involving the study of wildlife, and it provides or clarifies instructions for submission of IACUC approval information for proposals that involve the study of wildlife. Now, while we do not get a huge volume of proposals coming in directly from Grants.gov, there are institutions that consistently do use Grants.gov, and there is the NSF Grants.gov application guide. So what we've done is we've made revisions in the Grants.gov application guide to be consistent with the revisions that I've just talked about. Again, that's for proposed applications submitted or due on or after January 14th, 2013. The big thing to keep in mind if you use Grants.gov is that Grants.gov for us doesn't have the capability that I talked about with regard to the project summary. It won't not accept it because you didn't fill out 3 separate text boxes on an overview, the intellectual merit and the broader impacts text boxes. So you need to include that as part of your one-page project summary in Grants.gov and send that to NSF, and it will be checked for compliance when it gets sent from Grants.gov and we upload it into Fastlane. Okay, moving right along, I just want to give you an update on cost sharing at NSF. We haven't made any changes in the grant proposal guide with regard to cost sharing, but I just want to give you some reminders that, just so you know, voluntary committed cost sharing is prohibited in solicited and unsolicited proposals. unless there is unless there's an agency policy or there's a director approval for a specific solicitation to include cost sharing. These are the programs currently that have required cost sharing. Both MRI and the Robert Noyce Scholarship Program have cost sharing as mandated by Congress. The other three were approved by NSF, that's the Engineering Research Centers, the Industry University Cooperative Research Centers, or IUCRC program, and the Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. I mentioned the Innovation Corps or I-Corps program earlier. That is the most recent one that has cost sharing, and that is only cost sharing. That cost sharing is where you get $5,000 in lieu of indirect costs, and that was approved last year by the NSF director. Also, with regard to cost sharing, we've now made it capable in Fastlane for you to remove the PI from the budget. Previously, you could not have the PI listed on the budget with $0 attached. You can now do that. The PI will remain on the cover sheet, but what you have to do is you need to describe the role of that PI in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of the proposal. And again, you want to describe the role. You do not want to ascribe any dollar amount or cost to that in the facilities, equipment, and other resources section of the proposal. Speaking of that section of the proposal, we've changed, we are changing the format of that section of proposals to give you more information about how you need to fill this out. And basically, you need to talk about what the institution is providing, both internal resources, external resources, physical resources, personnel resources, without any reference to cost and date of acquisition. Again, if you don't have anything to put in this section, you need to include a statement to that effect and upload it into Fastlane. Okay. Research.gov. I mentioned this with regard to the ACMS service, the financial service in Fastlane. Research.gov is the modernization of Fastlane. What you see on the left-hand side there of the screen are services that are either currently available or will be coming soon. Now, you can sign in currently with your Fastlane ID and password. Currently, the project outcomes report, which is a required report that is to be submitted at the same time as your final report, can only be submitted in Research.gov. And I'm going to talk about in just a moment, the Research Performance Progress Reports, the RPPR, the annual, final, and interim project reporting, which is moving from Fastlane to Research.gov. There are a series of financial services available, which I talked about. You can check the status of your NSF application in Research.gov, and there are some system-to-system applications where you can submit via Research.gov. Now, there is not, because we get this question all the time, we do not have a timeline for proposal submission in Research.gov. Eventually that will come. Fastlane is it works great. We know everyone loves it, but it's an old system, and it's not just a system, it's a series of systems. So when we make updates to Fastlane, we have to make a whole lot of other updates as well, and it's time consuming and costly. And so we will be moving to Research.gov in the future, but I don't have a timeline to give you for when everything will be moved over. What I can tell you is that we are moving things over in pieces, and this RPPR is the first major, or I should say second major one after the project outcomes report. So what is the RPPR? The RPPR is basically research agencies, finding a common format, a common set of data elements to use that are standardized across the research agencies. It's an activity that NSF led and has been going on for the entire time that I've been at NSF, and as Heather mentioned earlier, I started in 2003. But we are finally, and this is finally coming to fruition, we have agreement on all of the data elements, and agencies are posting or are implementing this. What I can say, I'm going to talk about NSF's implementation, but you can see all the other agency implementation plans on the NSF website. There's an RPPR section on the NSF website. You can get to it from the policy office site. If you can find that, it should be pretty easy. And you can see how all the other research agencies are implementing this. So we are offering this new reporting service in Research.gov. It's going to replace the FastLane reporting system. Basically, we are going to be improving the user experience. We're going to be able to better sort and review and search the data that we do collect, and it's going to make things, we believe, much easier for you and much more beneficial for everyone in the short and in the long term. So these are the components for the Research Performance Progress Report that all the research agencies are using. These are what NSF is using. So there's a mandatory category. Every agency has this mandatory category of accomplishments, and then there are optional categories that agencies could pick and choose to use. We've chosen to pick just about all of them, and they should look familiar to you because this RPPR was really built off of the NSF Progress Report. So if you're familiar with the components of the NSF Progress Report, you will be you won't be disappointed here. The key differences with regard to the project reporting system in Research.gov as opposed to FastLane is that you will have a complete overlook and overview of all of your reports, which awards they're tied to, when they're due, when they're becoming overdue, and also the status of what percentage of the report is complete. So if you start it and then you come back to it, you'll know how much more of the report needs to be completed. There's a rich text editor. You'll have the ability to upload images and other graphics via PDF upload. We've improved the citation search through the Thomson Web of Science. And if there are additional reporting requirements or special reporting requirements that are attached to a specific solicitation, those will be brought in to Research.gov, to this reporting module. The other thing to note is that the PI can no longer or will no longer be able to provide demographic information on other significant participants. Those other participants will be required, or not required, will have the ability to provide demographic information for themselves. Okay, so this is where we stand currently. We're currently we've completed phase 1 pilot. We're about to begin a phase 2 pilot with 25 organizations. And then the final launch for everyone, we're looking at January next year. Now, I do know from recently that we are looking for some other institutions that would be interested in piloting this in phase 2. If your institution would be interested, not individual PIs, but if your institution would be interested, send me an email to jleffler@nsf.gov and we can provide you additional information. Okay? That's for institutions, not individuals. Now, during the pilot phase, PIs in the pilot will use Research.gov to view reporting requirements, to create and submit reports. If they go into FastLane and they're in the pilot, they'll be redirected to Research.gov to submit their reports. We will be, for those in this pilot phase, we're going to be freezing their access in Fastlane. We want them to start their reports in Research.gov and they won't be able to start them in Fastlane and then continue them in Research.gov. We want them to do it all in Research.gov. Again, as I mentioned, we're expected to roll this out in January 13th, you will expect to be seeing these for everyone in January of 2013. If you try to get, once we do roll it out, if you try to go into Fastlane, you will be redirected to Research.gov. When we do things like this, we always try to be very considerate of new technologies, of new requirements. Not that this is a new requirement, it's a new technology, but we will extend some deadline dates to ensure that you have the time needed to get those reports into us. This is a quick view of what a PI will see. You can see those categories that I mentioned earlier, the accomplishments, the products, the participants. The mandatory category is the accomplishments section. They will need to fill that in, but if you look and you see, this is the impact section. There's a checkbox that says nothing to report. If you don't have anything to report for that component, you just check that box and move on. We're doing a lot of outreach on Research.gov. They're doing webinars to guide you through this process. You can go to Research.gov and find information about when they are. You can also send an email to webinars@Research.gov to sign up for their next webinar. They've been pretty successful and well attended. There's also any questions that you have on Research.gov you can send to rgov@nsf.gov. And I believe that is what I have for you today. If you have questions for me, Leffler@nsf.gov. Questions for policy@nsf.gov. What I've included here on this slide are links to our staff list. You can find every program officer, every grants officer, every policy specialist on our website, email and direct phone numbers. And I've also included a link there about rotator opportunities at NSF. A good portion of our program officers come to NSF from research institutions like yours. They come to NSF from 1 to 3 years. They are in charge of programs, in charge of the review process, and of making funding recommendations on behalf of the foundation to guide science and to guide the research as major components of our foundation. So we're always looking for rotators. If you're interested or you know others who might be interested, they can be invaluable to you when they come back after spending 3 years with us at NSF. So I do commend that to you, and I'm certainly happy to take any questions that you have now or in the future to policy@nsf.gov.
Thank you, Jeremy. We actually have several questions already.
Okay.
And with your permission, when we get done, I'll send them to you for the creation of the FAQ on the website. So
excellent.
Certainly these questions I think will be helpful. Again, if you have questions, please send them to federalupdate@missouri.edu. We'll answer as many as we can, and anything we don't get to today, we will make sure that they get to Jeremy directly and so that he can answer them. Our first question is for the PPPG changes effective in January 2013, are we able to address these changes in proposals with deadlines prior to that date? Specifically, the change in biosketches to include products in addition to publications. Are we able to use products if this better suits the experience of the personnel?
So some of that, thank you for your question, some of that, the general answer is yes, you can. But keep in mind that the system changes within Fastlane have not been made yet, right? So with that, you'll see the terminology hasn't changed in Fastlane, and you'll also notice for the project summary with regard to the merit review criteria that the system changes have not gone into effect yet and won't until January 14th. What we expect is that those changes will be made over the weekend prior to January 14th.
Okay, thank you. What is the rationale in not allowing indirect cost recovery for subawardees? What does it generally in your statement mean?
So indirect costs is a huge, has been a huge issue for us, and has been an issue because of our cost sharing policy. Again, we didn't want to be in the position of going against our own policy. So I'd have to say that while I'm not the indirect cost rate guru at NSF, so I really would prefer to take those questions to policy@nsf.gov, and what we will do is get our somebody from our cost analysis branch to get in touch with you to answer specific questions about indirect cost rates.
All right, thank you. Again, if you have questions, send them to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Here's a question about how to use the new boxes in FastLane.
Okay.
It was stated that in the project summary there are 3 separate boxes that need to be filled out. However, if you needed special characters for math and engineering in the summary, you could upload a PDF document. It was stated that you could either attach the PDF or fill out the text box, but it was also stated that you will not be able to submit without information in those text boxes. How does that work if you upload a PDF and you don't fill out the text boxes?
So there's a box, thank you. There's a box there for you to check. There will be a box for you to check in FastLane that indicates that you have a proposal that includes special characters. You will check that box and you will not be able to fill out those text boxes for the project summary. You will then have to, in your PDF document that you upload that has special characters, include those headings yourself.
Thank you. Again, that email address for questions is federalupdate@missouri.edu. Can you give us some examples of types of organizational support you would suggest an institution give to proposers in order to meet the new certification requirements?
Well, I think that it's basically you're certifying that already, but we're not going to tell you what that organizational support may be. You know, it may be. I guess I could say it could be, for example, equipment that you have, or that is available to the researchers. So something along those lines. You know, it could be an equipment that you have that will aid the researchers. It could be other structures that are in place to aid the PI in whatever area that they're working on in terms of their research. So networks that are available to them and so on. But if you have specific questions for what that means as it relates to your project, the best answer is to talk to the program officer for that project, because they can really give you a sense of what that might be.
Okay, thank you. Another question, do products include only cited or searchable items, or can they include items such as notable achievements, or in the case of business, financial acquisitions?
They could, yes.
Okay. So it's a pretty broad definition.
It's broad.
Okay, thank you. Again, if you have a question, send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Will FastLane warn proposers if their proposals are not acceptable?
Absolutely.
Good to know.
Not if they are not accepted, not if they're not acceptable. But if they're not if it won't accept, you will get a warning that FastLane will not accept it.
Okay, thank you. This is a question in regards to the America Competes Reauthorization Act. That act stipulates that broader impacts activities shall, quote, employ proven strategies and models and draw on existing programs and activities. However, the second of NSF's 5 new review elements, to what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts, seems to run counter to this directive. Can you explain this apparent discrepancy?
I don't know if that's a discrepancy. I'd have to look at that a little closer and see. I'd ask that person to get in touch with me directly, and we could continue that discussion offline.
Okay. And your email contact information is part of your presentation.
Absolutely.
So please feel free to send that question directly to Jeremy. Another question that's come in the past, In order to ensure that institutional support will be provided as promised in the proposal, we have included letters of support from our president, vice presidents, or deans as appropriate in the supplemental documents. Will this new OAR certification replace the need for those letters, or should we still consider including them?
Well, let me say something about letters of support. Unless the program solicitation is specifically calling for that, it's really not something that you want to include in your proposal. If it's just saying yes, I'm generalizing here, but if you're just saying this PI is, he's great, he's done fantastic work, I highly recommend him, we don't want to see those unless there is a specific reason for that, and it's specifically laid out in a program solicitation. But having said that, the organization, the support, giving institutional resources by certifying that the organization supports or will support that project and will support the broader impacts and the intellectual merit as proposed, that is something that would give you the background and the backup to say, yes, we are supporting, and the institution does support that project. But to just include it in the supplementary documents section is not something that is generally advised.
Thank you. Will you need a different logon for Research.gov from what you will have for Fastlane?
Nope. You can log in right now with your NSF ID and password.
Thank you. Again, if you have a question, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. You mentioned that the summary will now be a required item for submission through Fastlane. Currently, for separately submitted collaborative research proposals, only the lead institution uploads the summary. What will now happen on collaborative proposals for non-lead institutions?
That will not change. The lead institution will continue, will need to submit the summary as it appears and as it has been changed, but the process for collaborative proposals has not changed.
Okay, this question is a long one. It's got some explanation around it.
Yep.
It's about the third merit review principle. Can you give any examples of what it means to assess broader impact activities at a higher, more aggregated level than the individual project? Here's an example I'm thinking of. Sometimes PIs participate in a campus-wide program, such as serving as a mentor in a university-wide program that places high school students in research labs for the summer. Such university-wide programs have a director and a staff for evaluation of program effectiveness and student achievement. For some PIs, however, mentoring high school students is a one-time event for a particular project. The participating student is not enrolled in the larger university program. Evaluation of one student is not very meaningful in terms of determining whether or not that particular experience was effective. Does this mean that a single PI must coordinate his or her summer mentor program with the other PIs in the department in order to get an aggregated evaluation? So can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, that's a very specific question. I don't know that I'd want to go into the very specifics of that question, except to say that there has to be this correlation between broader impacts and the resources that are provided. And you need to talk about that within your proposal, and there needs to be a plan for that. Now, and when it comes to your specific plan, again, this is going to sound like I'm repeating the same line, but you really need to talk to your program officer about that, because they're the ones that can give you guidance on how you're meeting the intent of the program.
Okay, thank you. When in doubt, call your program officer.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the questions, and we will take them as we develop these FAQs, so I really do appreciate the questions.
Thank you. Again, if you have a question, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Have a question about some of the new certifications. Can you elaborate on the new certification in regards to tax obligations / liability and felony conviction? What is the AOR certifying?
Let's see, I have some information on that. This is not the kind of information I keep at the tip of my tongue, so I apologize if I'm reading here. There is a certification regarding federal tax obligations when the proposal exceeds $5 million, the AOR is required to complete a certification regarding those federal tax obligations. There's a certification regarding unpaid federal tax liability. If the proposer is a corporation, the AOR is required to complete a certification that the corporation has no unpaid federal tax liability that has been assessed for which all judicial and administrative remedies have been exhausted or lapsed, and that is being paid in a timely manner. The third one is a certification regarding criminal convictions, and that is if the proposer is a corporation, the AOR is required to complete a certification that the corporation has not been convicted of a felony or criminal violation under any federal law within the 24 months preceding the date of which the certification is signed. So that's what I have. I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. A question about the new project summary. The project summary is limited to 4,600 characters. Is that a total amount, or is there going to be a specific breakdown in terms of number of characters in each of the 3 categories?
Thank you. We get that question often, so want to be clear about that. There is not a specific breakdown. It is across all 3 of those text boxes. Okay, so 4,600 characters to be divided as you see fit between the overview, the intellectual merit, and the broader impacts categories.
Okay, thank you. Again, if you have any questions for Jeremy Leffler of the NSF, please let me know. Are you able to take questions about general programs or more about policy and procedures?
More about policy and procedures. We'd ask that you could still send those to policy@nsf.gov, and we can route them to, if it's something that we can't answer, we can route them directly to the program that is responsible.
Okay, thank you. We have had several questions come in about very specific funding programs and opportunities. We'll make sure that those get to the right place.
Excellent.
Rather than address them here. Any last questions for Jeremy Leffler at the NSF? Okay. We are having a little bit of a time lag. Again, if you have questions, please send them to Federal Update at Missouri.edu. Okay, so the previous very long question has attempted to clarify. She doesn't understand what it means to keep in mind the likely correlation between the effect of broader impacts and the resources provided to implement projects.
So we're talking about the what is being used in terms of resources. How you're using your resources that you have to bring about the broader impacts that you've said that you're going to do. Okay, so that's what you need to be in mind. That's the correlation. How are you spending the resources? What are you doing? What did you say you were going to do? And how are you assessing whether what you said you were going to do and what you said the outcomes would be actually are?
Thank you. A question again about the character limits. Is that going to include spaces?
That's a first. I'll have to get back to you on that one. If you could get that person's number to me. It's basically the 4,600 is what our systems folks told us is a full page. So if it includes, so it may include spaces, it can't be more than a page. And there will be a counter to tell you, it will tell you whether you've exceeded it or not.
Okay.
If that helps.
I know sometimes the spaces, non-spaces can trip people up quite a lot. So
you do need to include spaces in there.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question about the ACM Bling system. In anticipation of the migration to Research.gov, will there be any additional guidelines, facts, or webinars on the new system?
Yes, check Research.gov. They've been doing some webinars on ACMS in Research.gov, and there may be some information that's posted there. If not, if you send me an email, I can forward that to the person in our Division of Financial Management, who's responsible.
Okay. Any last questions for Jeremy Leffler at the NSF? Please send them to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Again, several questions about specific programs came in, and we'll make sure that those get to the right place after this broadcast is finished. Any last questions? If not, I'm going to say thank you very much for presenting. It was great to have you here, and I'm sure that there will be, we have one last question that came in, last minute question. If the PI has been removed from the budget form, should his or her role also not be included in the budget justification? If not, will reviewers be alert to looking for the information about the PI role in the resources page?
They should be included in the resources page. The issue with it not being on the budget, it ties back to our cost sharing policy, right? So you want to describe the role in the facilities, equipment, and other resources page, and that's where reviewers are being directed to look.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. Our next speaker is coming up at the top of the hour.
Thank you.